Yes, welcome in. Just a little more than 48 hours away from Wisconsin and Penn State doing battle at Camp Randall Stadium. Does it feel like a big game week for you, Jesse? The older I get, the tougher this gets to trying to see like what the feel is around on campus. Like I'm sure it is on campus. This is going to be a huge game. It's a night game. I'm sure the students are jacked for it, but it feels a little bit difficult. Also, because we're not downtown every day like we used to be. Like back when I first started covering it in 2013, you'd be down there on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So it'd be a little bit different. But does it feel like a big game to you?
Yeah, I think it's a huge game, and you're right. We're not hanging out at the bars necessarily, or I'm not because I'm old, talking to all the fans. But you just get a sense of what this one can mean. I know they've already had one like this against Alabama, but they weren't playing particularly well going into that. So the fact they're on a 3-game winning streak, and I know we'll get into our picks and what we think about this particular matchup, but there's just a lot at stake. You throw in the night game element, and it's got a potential to be really special.
It does. It does. I'm just feeling back to the last time they beat the number 3 team, and I'm remembering that week leading into Ohio State, when they were the number 3 team in the country, and they came in here on a long winning streak because they'd won the national title the year before. And just like I can remember like being at work and like humming the fight song in my head, just because like that's like everyone was just so jacked just for the opportunity to knock a team off like that. And I feel like I would assume students and the younger people are maybe the same way. And I shouldn't even say the younger people. I'm sure there's older fans that are, excited about it as well. But it does feel like big game. For me, it does feel like a big game, and it should be because it's the number 3 team in the country. And how many opportunities do you get like this to come along to potentially not just give yourself a boost as a program, but also knock down another one that has been a little bit of a problem for you to beat over the last decade plus. So we'll get into all of it and get into your story on Matt Bernstein, because 20 years ago, he lit the world on fire. Not the world on fire. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Lit the world on fire with his scintillating performance against Penn State after having to fast for 24 hours almost. And then also we'll get into our picks, and we'll talk about this game as well and the keys to winning and everything like that. We'll start, though, with Homefield. They are the official apparel sponsor of the camp, the best vintage gear you can possibly find. Go check them out, homefieldapparel.com. They've got these new in the last month or so, they've got new pullover jackets, little 90s inspired pullover jackets. They've got these coaches jackets that feel a little more 80s like, I should say, but just a ton of gear. Go check it out, homefieldapparel.com. If you use the promo code Bucky24, you get 15% off your first purchase. So homefieldapparel.com. All right, let's jump into this. What does success look like against Penn State and Drew Allar?
I'll start by saying that
Allar? Drew Allar or Drew Allar?
I want to go with Allar. But
all right, let's go with Allar. No, that's fine. It's our show. It's our show. We get to decide.
This feels, and if you're going on vibes, it feels like a gettable game for Wisconsin in a way that I didn't feel the last couple times they played top 5 opponents at home under Luke Fickell. Obviously, a year ago against number 3 Ohio State, and the Badgers had a pretty solid showing, but ended up losing 24-10. And we know what happened earlier this season against then number 4 Alabama when Wisconsin lost 42-10. So every week I say, oh, success looks like a win, but this doesn't feel like a pie in the sky thought process coming into this. And of course, we can dive deeper into why that is. But what success looks like offensively, I think, starts with Braedyn Locke not turning the ball over. This is something you were concerned about going into the Northwestern game. He's thrown at least 1 interception in all 4 of his starts this year. He's got 6 turnovers total during that stretch. And for the most part, it has not come back to bite Wisconsin. Now, he did throw a 55-yard pick 6 against USC late in that game. But you look at the last 3 during this winning streak, he had 2 interceptions against Purdue, only one of which was his fault. Purdue got inside the 10 and really got close to the goal line, and the defense bowed up both times and forced Purdue into field goals. Those were the only points of the game. Rutgers got an interception, went 3 and out. And then Northwestern got an interception and recovered a fumble, and on both those occasions went 3 and out. I just think we know this is not – Penn State is not like the last three teams. They are clearly on a different level. And if you give the Nittany Lions the ball at midfield, I think you're going to be in big trouble. I went back and looked, and I think 4 of the 5 turnovers in this 3-game winning streak that Locke had, the other team got the ball somewhere between the 40-yard lines. That's just a recipe for disaster. So I would start there because you don't want to give a team like Penn State extra opportunities.
So just so you don't get the Locke haters in your mentions, this pick 6, that was a Kahuna drop.
Yes.
And one of the interceptions against Purdue was a Will Pauling drop. So just to avoid that happening to you, I just want to get it out there.
Thank you. I think he's played well. I mean,
that Braedyn Locke, while he has thrown interceptions, they're not always his fault.
Yes. And of course, we can't go this whole show without mentioning Locktober, and you get that nickname by playing well and winning games. Like, he's done some good things. It's just, if you're going to put a ball down the field into coverage or something and you're feeling it, you don't want to put yourself in a spot where Penn State's got the ball in really good field position. And he knows it. He mentioned it to reporters this week that there's a difference between being aggressive and being stupid. I think he said that on a couple of occasions. So he knows what he has to do. And we'll see whether they can limit those kinds of mistakes.
Yes. That said about the drops, they have been an issue at times, for sure. He's turned it over in 6 of the 9 games he's played, like extensive time. The fumbles are certainly something that you can put on him as well. I know that it's not always that case if guys coming free, but protect the ball in the pocket is certainly one of those things. I do think that's a huge, huge key for Wisconsin. And then perhaps to help out everything else, the run game. We talked about this last week going into the Northwestern game. They were a very good run defense. They were a top 10 run defense in the country. Here comes Penn State, another top 10 run defense in the country. Teams averaging just 3.2 yards per carry. And can you get your run game going against Penn State? Because if you can, then I think it slows down what is one of the better pass rushers that they're going to face this year in Abdul Carter. Just an absolute wrecking ball. NFL.com called him a cross between Micah Parsons, quite good, and Chop Robinson, both first-round picks. So going to be on the edge. He was more of an off-ball linebacker the last couple of years, but he's going to be on the edge. Big-time athlete. Huge, huge test, I think, for Jack Nelson and Riley Mullman, and just the offensive line in general, because some of the athletes that Penn State's going to be able to throw at you. But Jack Nelson, I saw this stat the other day, and I couldn't go back. I couldn't find it anywhere. So it's more of a I couldn't find the exact place that he was at, but he is in the top 10 of Pro Football Focus's win rate when it comes to pass blocking. He's winning 95 or 96% of the time. He's lost 9 pass blocking reps in the first 7 games of the season. That's significant. That's huge. And that is the type of player that I think we expected Jack Nelson to be last year, but he has been this year. They've got a huge test in that Penn State front and trying to slow those guys down. Trying to think of what else for Wisconsin offensively. Getting the ball to their playmakers, which we have seen them do a pretty solid job of over the last 3 weeks, right? Who are the 3 guys that you want the ball in the hands of? Not taking Tyree Walker out of this equation in the pass game or in the run game, figuring out a way to get in the ball. It's Vinny Anthony, it's Kahuna, and it's Will Pauling. And I thought they've done a good job, especially against Northwestern, of just forcing it to those guys in various ways. And I think that's their best way to success on offense.
Yeah, a couple things off that. Getting the ball out quickly is going to be paramount, which is something that Braedyn acknowledged this week too. Because if you stand back there for an extra second, Penn State has the type of defensive players to put you into a world of trouble. And so I'm interested to see what that looks like. How do they blend some of those deep shots? Because I still think they're going to take a handful, since we know that it can change the game, with, as you say, getting the ball into playmakers' hands near the line of scrimmage, try to block it up well, and have them go make a play in space. But you're right about Jack Nelson. He is a different player, and it's by leaps and bounds. I think I referenced this a week ago for the story that I wrote about A.J. Blazek, but he was talking about how he met with A.J. quite frequently during the offseason when they were going over his film. And he was trying to figure out, what do I do? Because he was really in his own head. We know that he committed 12 penalties last year, or at least 12 that were assessed, which was the most in the Big Ten. 5 of them were false starts. 7 of them were holding penalties. And Blazek really helped change his mindset about how quickly you come out of your stance, because that's why he kept going off sides. He said, I was trying to be so fast to the edge that I was jumping before the snap. And AJ tried to explain to him, just because you do that quicker doesn't mean you're going to put yourself in a better position. And in fact, you're going to be less poised and you're going to slip off your block. And then in addition to that, it's the pass pro, because AJ said the first thing that Riley, Mallman, and Jack Nelson came to him about were, how do we get better at pass pro? And so there are certain things that Jack has been able to do with his steps so that he doesn't fall off those blocks. And you're seeing the results, because you're right. This is the player that we thought Jack would be a year ago. It's clearly taken a little bit more time, perhaps, in this system. But that is one of the huge keys here. Can you protect Braedyn, give him a lot of time? And obviously, can you open holes for a guy like Tawee Walker? Because it's very clear that he is going to carry 20 plus times. And that's something that Luke Fickell talked about this week, is sometimes you obviously learn more about a player the deeper you get into a season. Luke said they had a guy at Cincinnati who was like an NFL guy, but they realized very early on he was not necessarily the type of player who was going to be able to shoulder that kind of load. And they're seeing with Tawee, it seems like he gets better the more he goes along. So if you're going to be able to move the chains, it's going to have to continue to be that physical, aggressive running style that we've seen.
And it doesn't seem like he takes a ton of big shots. Like, it feels like he's handing out some of the shots. Now, they did have a free runner at him near the goal line when Wisconsin was backed up. And even that hit, though, he kind of was able to take a little bit differently. But the other thing offensively for Wisconsin is staying on the field. They did a fantastic job against Purdue and against Rutgers. Against Alabama and USC, it's very similar to the defense, where they were just horrible on third down, couldn't get out the field. In those games, Wisconsin 5 for 24. The last 2 weeks, or I should say the 2 weeks against Penn State and against Rutgers, they were 15 for 28, which is great. Not so good last week, 4 for 12. They need to be I feel like they need to be above 40%. I feel like they, to really have a shot, and because Penn State's third down defense is pretty good. They're 12th. They are 20th in the country, number 2 in the Big Ten, allowing just 31.8. So staying on the field, again, it feels like these are all obvious things, but Wisconsin has shown the ability to do these things. Stay on the field, run the ball, pass protect, get the ball to the playmakers, all the things that we saw them do for large stretches of the last 3 weeks. If they do them on Saturday night, I think this game is very, very close, and Wisconsin has a great chance to win.
Yep. I think at the very least, these 3 weeks, really on both sides of the ball, have provided cautious optimism for what could be possible. And that's something that was lacking after the USC loss. Now, there was one good half against the Trojans, but you got blown out by Alabama. You obviously got blown out the second half at USC. And so, again, multiple things can be true, that what they've done has come against not good teams. And they've also done it in a way that we've rarely seen, certainly of late. And that gives you reason to believe that if they can keep that going, they're going to give themselves a legitimate opportunity to knock off Penn State Saturday night. Yeah.
Flipping over to the other side for Wisconsin's defense, facing a Penn State offense led by Drew Allar, who I think it was, I don't remember who it was, but it perhaps has the highest upside of any quarterbacks in this conference right now. I mean, just in terms of like NFL potential, like Dylan Gabriel is probably going to break the record for most passing yards in a career. Will Howard at Ohio has been solid, very, very, really good. But I think Drew Allar has the highest upside of any of these guys, and he hasn't always reached it. He is playing much better football this year. I shouldn't even say much better. He's playing better football than he was a year ago. Fantastic game down the stretch to beat USC. He had 391 yards. That drive to tie the game that sent it to overtime was fantastic. A couple of fourth down conversions on that drive. Had a couple of TDs. Also had 3 interceptions in that game, and has thrown 4 interceptions this year, which is 2 more than he did all of last year. His touchdown to interception ratio last year was 25-2. That is, I shouldn't even say the ratio. That's what it was. He was 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. However, his passer rating was just 136.9 because he struggled to complete passes. His completion percentage was 59. His yard per attempt was like 6 point something. Both of those are way up. He's completing 70% of his passes. He's averaging 10 yards per completion or per attempt. They're very impressive numbers. And outside of the one game against USC where he turned it over, he hasn't really turned the ball over either. So I look at him, and the ability to get pressure on Penn State is going to be significant. I know that they've done it at times these last 2 weeks, but is that something that you feel good about, that they're going to be able to get some pressure on him and force him to make some throws that he doesn't want to make?
I don't know if I feel good about it. I think there's a couple things that stand out. One, it's clear the guys on defense are talking like they're very confident, but I also go back to the way they talked after they beat South Dakota going into the Alabama week when they were saying, "Oh, look how good we've been in our adversity defense." And they weren't wrong, right? The defense on the whole was pretty good in those two games. Had one bad drive where an opponent rolled right down the field for a touchdown. Can't be perfect. And then they gave up 6 touchdowns in 12 drives against Alabama. So you're going to have to show you can do it against quality competition. What I find so interesting is Wisconsin has, and this is not debatable because it's in the stats, the best defense in the country in the month of October. And it's completely cherry picking a stat, but it's still a 3-game sample size. And we mentioned this before, they've given up 16 points, 1 touchdown over 3 Big Ten games, which they've not done since 1998. So it's like 5 points a game, 100 passing yards a game. I think they're number 1 in total defense. They're number 1 in third down conversion rate. I think the teams have converted about 19% of third downs. And like I said before, 2 things can be true. They've played bad offenses, and they've been really good against those bad offenses. So again, it goes back to like, at least you have a little bit of confidence or cautious optimism that they can continue it. But this is on a whole new level very clearly. So if there's something to be said for momentum, or at least like that confidence of, okay, we've put this on film, and so we have a level of belief, that's a good starting point.
Yeah, best defense that Allar faced was Illinois, and went 15 for 21 for 135 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. They are a team that is pass efficiency wise a top 5 team in the country, pass efficiency wise. But this offense, and we'll talk about Tyler Warren in a second, because was ridiculous against USC. It just has been ridiculous in general this year. But the run game has a chance to be lethal. They want to lean on that. They average 39 attempts a game. That's the second in the Big Ten, only to Wisconsin, who's averaging 40 runs per game. And Nick Singleton is an absolute, he's a beast. And the name shouldn't be unfamiliar to Wisconsin fans, as Wisconsin was hard after him, and he chose Penn State over Wisconsin and I believe one other team. But there was a time there that you thought Nick Singleton might be at Wisconsin. He is averaging close to 7 yards a carry. He missed one game, was, I would say, pedestrian against USC at 10 carries for 26 yards. But you have to think that bye week probably helps quite a bit for them health wise. And then Ketron Allen as well, 4.7 yards per carry. It's a team that averages over 200 yards a game on the ground. That is going to be a huge test for Wisconsin. We saw them bow up against the last 2 teams with Rutgers and what they wanted to do with their run game, and Northwestern. Again, not an overly impressive offense, but Cam Porter has had success at times in his career running the ball. Wisconsin did a really good job. I think the defensive line in this game, stopping the run, is going to be huge. Huge.
Yeah, it's a really strong 1-2 running back tandem, and they're going to continue to feed them and make Wisconsin make some plays. I do think one thing the Badgers have done a really good job of these last 3 weeks is keeping the play in front of them and not giving up that huge play, absolutely backbreaking. And it's so difficult to discern. Again, they're playing well, and they're playing offenses that just are not particularly explosive, certainly not in the passing game. But at the very least, you've got that game against Rutgers where Kyle Monungai came in second in the Big Ten in rushing yards, 130 plus, and other than a touchdown early in the fourth quarter, really didn't do much. So, but you're right. It starts with the defensive line. I would say I do have a lot more confidence in their capabilities at this point, especially the top 3, where you've got Elijah Hills, Ben Barton, and Kurt Neal. They're really playing the bulk of the snaps, and maybe you get a handful where you put Dylan Johnson in there, McDonald, Brandon Lane, we have not heard a ton from. He's gotten a handful of snaps. But those top 3 have it feels like, come into their own, and they're playing really good football, and they're going to have to keep doing it.
Penn State, statistically, is by far the best offense that they've faced this year. So
yeah, they're averaging 34 points a game.
They're a top 10 total offense in the country. They're balanced 270 through the air, 200 on the ground. Like it's going to be a huge challenge. And we heard Mike Tressel talk about some of the exotic looks that they're going to throw out there that is going to be a challenge for the defense to match, because he thinks what they've done so well this week, or these last 3 weeks, is play fast and stop thinking. And Penn State's going to make you think a little bit. Just go to the play that Tyler Warren caught a touchdown pass on against USC, where he started out as the center and snapped the ball, and then eventually ended up back in Drew Allar's hands, and he caught a great touchdown. The thing is, USC wasn't fooled by it. Like, there was a guy right there to make a play, but Tyler Warren has just been fantastic. How many catches did he have against USC? Was it 18?
He had 17 catches for, I think, 224 yards. I think it tied the most ever for a tight end in an FBS game. And it's crazy. Like, that number obviously changes the total receptions for the season, but he's got 40 catches. Nobody else on the team has more than 17. It's very clear they're going to try and target him. And Hunter Wohler talked this week about having to be very intentional in how they choose to defend him and what players they put on him, because he is a mismatch nightmare and best tight end in the country. So you got a guy that talented, you want to figure out different ways to get him the ball.
How do you envision them defending him? I mean, because I heard Hunter Wohler say that it's about who you put on him. Who do they put on him? Do they throw multiple guys at him? Do they play zone? I mean, like, how do you deal with that? Because he's got his catches, the 40 catches he has, more than double the next guy on this team.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't know if I know the answer to that. Like, who would be best positioned to defend him? I don't think you want to, like, put a linebacker on him. But I don't know what DB.
Hunter Wohler makes
them line up.
I feel like Hunter Wohler makes a ton of sense, but I also feel like Austin Brown kind of this feels like an Austin Brown type of challenge, right? Bigger body, big guy, safety, can run with him. Feels like he's physical enough to play with him, but again, they have some options, and I don't think they're going to throw the exact same thing at him every single play.
Yeah, it's a good call on Brown, and I think Brown started against Northwestern. Lofi's obviously gotten some action, but he's played in a lot of different spots, and he's probably the most versatile, so it makes sense.
Yeah. So Penn State new offensive coordinator this year, Andy Kotelnicki, is from Minnesota. He played his college football in Wisconsin, not at Wisconsin, but in Wisconsin, and then was at Kansas these last few years with Lance Leipold. So I feel like he's got while he hadn't necessarily worked a ton in the Big Ten, he's got a feel for the Big Ten, and I think he certainly knows what Wisconsin football is about. I think he's been as big of a ad for Penn State as you could possibly hope for. He's been fantastic for that offense.
Yeah, they've been great this year. And that's why they're a college football playoff team right now.
Yep, definitely. Also very, very good on third down, averaging their percentage 48.5%. Third down conversions. Wisconsin has been fantastic on third down these last few weeks. I know they're raw stats. I know a lot of people like analytics instead, but like it does come down to a few things. Don't turn the ball over, get off the field on third down, stay on the field on third down if you're Wisconsin. And I think it could be a fun, close game. Special teams wise, Atticus Bertram's be a weapon.
Yeah.
And Nathaniel Vakos, get back to where you were at the beginning of the season.
I will say, like, I know we've got constant questions about Wisconsin and how good are they and what does this 3-game winning streak mean? For a number 3 team in the country, I feel like there's a lot of questions about how good is Penn State really, in part because there have been some moments where they haven't been great. I mean, they trailed at halftime against Bowling Green. They trailed at halftime against USC. I realize what USC ended up doing to Wisconsin, and it's not easy to go out there and win. But I do feel like there are at least some questions where you're not sure if they're the number 3 team in the country, but there are only 10 unbeaten teams left in the FBS, and they're one of them. So even if you don't play well, their ability to win no matter what is impressive.
Yeah. So I will say I'm going to find it before we make our picks, but Penn State has not been great coming off of bye weeks under James Franklin. So I'm going to find the stat before we actually do our picks, but they have not been good. So just we'll throw that out there. The game is obviously the biggest focus, but there's a lot that goes around the game because it is a night game and it's a big time opponent and it's a big time environment. And Wisconsin is going to try and take advantage of it as much as they possibly can. It is a big recruiting weekend for them on a number of levels.
I took a couple notes here because I can't possibly remember all the names, especially guys who aren't committed, but this is probably the biggest recruiting weekend they've had to date. And you may ask, well, what about Alabama? I think there is a huge difference between an 11 a.m. game on a Saturday and a 6:30 p.m. game, because realistically, even if it's a massive game, how many high school guys beyond a few hour drive can you get there for an 11 a.m. game when they're playing the night before and they're going to 10, 11 o'clock? So this gives Wisconsin an opportunity to get guys in from all over the country. The list is, as of now, 27 players. I think 10 of them are committed prospects, but I wrote down a few of them that are uncommitted that I at least think are notable and that I don't think they would have here if it was an 11 a.m. game. They have 2 quarterbacks coming in, one from California, one from Georgia. One's in the 2026 class. His name is Ryan Hopkins. Wisconsin just offered him a couple of weeks ago. He's from California. Michigan State offered him. Missouri just offered him a couple days ago. I think this is notable in part because Wisconsin does have a commitment in the 2026 class from Jaron Mock, the kid from Pickerington, Ohio. And so maybe they feel like they need clearly more than one in that class, or they wouldn't continue to pursue somebody. And then they've also got a 2027 prospect, which makes me feel even older that they're already going after 2027 guys. But Teddy Girard, he's a guy from Georgia. He visited this summer. He has an offer. So again, guys that I don't think you would have here for an 11 a.m. game, but they've got 4 tight ends. They've got a couple running backs, including a 4-star guy from Georgia, Amari Latimer. He's got 26 offers, and he's probably a Texas lean. But the point is, this is the type of opportunity where you can really showcase your program in prime time, everything Camp Randall is about, everything this Badgers program is about and wants to be. And so sometimes I think maybe we make too much of one game, whether they win or lose. Though I would point out Wisconsin was able to flip somebody who decommitted from Purdue and picked Wisconsin, who was there to watch Wisconsin absolutely annihilate Purdue a few weeks ago. But if you can win, I think it shows where the program is headed, and it can be a big, big deal.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's better than Rutgers' big weekend a couple weeks ago out there when they had Wisconsin in town and had like just a huge, huge recruiting weekend in terms of guys on campus and got the absolute snot knocked out of them. So that's the thing you don't want to happen, but it provides a huge opportunity. And that's I guess that's pretty much all that matters. It gives you a chance to show exactly what your program's about, gives you a chance to show exactly what you could potentially be, not just today, but obviously the future with everybody coming in. So yeah, I mean, it's a big time weekend. All right, let's get into a story that you put out there on Wednesday. Matt Bernstein. And for anybody that's a longtime listener of this podcast, Bernie's actually the one that I started this podcast with back in, I believe it was 2017. And we did it the first 2 years together. And then the last, obviously you joined me in 2019 and we've been doing it since. But he is famous for a lot of things, including being a football player. Now he's a big time podcast host with Believe Badgers, but he was a fantastic football player, fantastic fullback when Wisconsin still used fullbacks on a regular basis. And he had a game of his life when he got moved from fullback to tailback because of injuries. And they just so happened to be on the holiday, the Jewish holiday, Yom Kippur. And it worked out fantastic for Wisconsin and for Bernie. And you had a chance to catch up with him and Brian White is the running backs coach back then and talk about that game, which was a 16-3 win for the Badgers in a game that started like I think at 4:30.
There have been some amazing rushing performances at Wisconsin. They've had 2 Heisman Trophy winning running backs, 4 Doak Walker Award winners. And I would venture to say this is the most improbable rushing performance Wisconsin has ever had, given where things started. He hadn't carried more than 6 times in a game in his career. He had 17 yards rushing at that point in the season. And what makes it such a remarkable story is the additional element of, Matt is of the Jewish faith, and Yom Kippur is the holiest day on the Jewish calendar. It's a day of atonement. And those who observe fast, so they don't eat or drink anything for 24 hours. And that Saturday happened to be Yom Kippur. It's a holiday that he's observed since he was younger, still observes it to this day. And he said that he was looking at the schedule with his dad in the summer before the game and realized, oh man, that's going to fall on Yom Kippur. And if it's an 11 a.m. game, he was adamant. He said, I'm not going to play. And the football gods and good fortune smiled upon Bernie and Wisconsin, because ESPN's College Game Day crew decided to come for that game, and they pushed the start time to 4:45 p.m. so it could lead into the Pete Rose TV movie Hustle.
Of course.
Just bizarre. And because of that, Matt and his dad came up with a plan. Sundown, so it's supposed to be sundown to sundown. Sundown would have occurred about 2 hours later. And his dad, who he said was his glorified rabbi, and so anything he says, Matt would do, said if you'd be willing to move it up by a couple of hours, there's a chance you could play. And so we went to Brian White and Barry Alvarez with his plan and said, I need to be fed at the team hotel by Friday at 4:30 p.m., which would give him 24 hours. I'm not going to be with the team that night, which is not a big deal because they usually go to a movie. There's really nothing left to accomplish other than you watch a highlight video. And on Saturday morning, he was going to go to the UW Hillel, be with his family, commemorate the holiday, and he wasn't going to warm up, and he was just going to take the field. And they were agreeable to it, other than they said, you've got to take an IV like an hour before the game because there's no way we're going to let you on the field with zero fluids. And he agreed to that. He broke the fast by running onto the kickoff team because you're not supposed to do any physical activity. And then they had turkey and orange slices for him on the sideline. And that in itself would have been a great story, except that they got to halftime. Their 2 running backs were both banged up. Anthony Davis was out with an eye injury from 3 weeks before. Davis's backup, his football career ended a month before because he had a heart condition. So they had no running backs left. And Brian White goes to Barry and says, I want to put Matt Bernstein in. And initially Barry objected to it because he's like, he doesn't know the footwork. He's a 270-pound fullback. And Brian White said, no, he's ready. I've seen him in practice. The fullbacks and the running backs work together. And by the way, Bernstein ran for 2,000 yards as a fullback in a wing tee his senior year of high school. So very athletic. They gave him a shot. And he goes in there and just absolutely tears it up. They ran a first play of the third quarter for a 12-yard gain. He leaps a dude for 17 yards up the middle. They kick a field goal, and he ends up carrying 27 times for 123 yards. And it was just a truly remarkable performance. And I think what's so fascinating is 20 years later, the people who were involved with it are sort of still in awe. Brian White is still a coach now at Bowling Green. I texted him for this story. He called me 2 minutes later because he wanted to talk about Matt Bernstein. And he said it's like one of the most amazing things he's seen in 38 years as a coach. And I also talked to Joe Thomas and Barry about this. And Joe Thomas said, I think it's the game I will remember until the day I die. And Badger fans probably feel the same because they were looking at it going, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday. I will say the hurdles of the 2 guys have grown in lore as we get further and further away. Like, he leaped majestically over a guy and ran. No, but they were impressive. And the pop that those 2 leaps got in the stadium were just insane. Like, the place went wild every time he touched the ball and got like 4 yards or 5 yards. And every time he would do just a little thing here or there that, a 270-pound guy leaping a guy, most amazing thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And it was amazing. And the fact that it happened on the holiday that it is obviously so important to him, in a game that, Wisconsin, that 2004 team ended up into the top 10 in the country. It was an important win for them. Like, I know Penn State wasn't very good that year, but it was a huge win at the time too. I will say the one image that stands out outside of what Bernie did in that game was Erasmus James knocking 2 quarterbacks out. And in the first one, he like hits them and he like does like he's on one knee and he's got his arms up like, yes. And then in the background, you can see, I think it was Michael Robinson, like head down on the ground, like got knocked out. I had an image, 23-year-old Zach had that image as his background on his computer for a little bit. Yeah, 20 years ago. Yeah, but it was an amazing game. I love that game. It's one of those. They had just had a stretch in 2003, 2004, 2005 of just insane, memorable games, like the '03 game with Shaver to Evans, right? And then '04 this game, and then you had the game down at Purdue where Kyle Orton gets helicoptered, and it's they return the kick for or the fumble for a touchdown. In 2005, you had the Michigan game with John Stocco getting the quarterback draw at the end of the game to win it. And you had the obviously the memorable block punt up at Minnesota. There was just a run where you just had like, oh my God, memorable games that you're never going to forget type of stuff. And this one's definitely up there.
Yeah. And Brian White said because of those two hurdles, he joked in the locker room afterward, and maybe for a little bit longer, everybody called him the Hebrew Hammer, which is an amazing nickname and probably coincided with the fact there was a bad movie that came out in '03, but he started calling him the hurdling Hebrew Hammer.
It's good. It's good. Yeah, I mean, great game, great memory. And Bernie's got some of the best stories too. So anytime you get a chance to listen to anything that he does, it's a must listen for sure. All right, time to get into our picks for the week. Are things closer in the mirror than they appear, Jesse?
I've had a couple bad weeks and you've had a couple good weeks, but you know what? We're both above 500, and I'm going to say that's all that matters in this game.
All right. If you say so. I'm going to say that right now, just a game back of Jesse. He is 31-24-1. I'm 30-25-1. And we go into week 9 here. 7 more games, a number of big games on a number of different levels. We'll start with a huge one at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. Notre Dame, the 12th ranked team of the country, is a 13.5-point favorite against unbeaten and 24th ranked Navy.
I can't believe this. And this is why college football is awesome. Army and Navy are both undefeated at this stage of the season. Look, we know those teams like to make it tough for you by running the triple option. I think this is going to be a real challenge for Notre Dame. They've shown they're susceptible. And so I think Navy's going to cover.
I think it's going to be a tight game. 13.5 is a lot. I'm going to take Navy as well on that one. All right, LSU traveling to Texas A&M. LSU, the 8th ranked team in the country. Texas A&M 14th. The Aggies are 2.5-point favorites.
Hard to believe how much things change in 6 or 7 weeks because USC beat LSU in the opener, and it seemed to be a moment that showed USC could hang in the Big Ten, and now USC's 1-4. But I digress. I think Texas A&M is going to cover at home.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Texas A&M. Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm gonna go Texas A&M at home, 2.5. All right, Texas trying to bounce back from they got dominated by Georgia at home. They've dropped to number 5 in the country. However, they are 18.5-point favorites at number 25 Vanderbilt. The last time a big-time team went into Vanderbilt, I believe they were the number 1 team in the country, and things did not go well for Alabama. But this is an 18.5-point spread at home. They're facing.
In any other year, I would say Texas rolls. They're coming off a loss. I know it was to Georgia. And Vanderbilt is obviously not your older brothers, your uncles, your dads, your grandfathers, your great-grandfathers' Vanderbilt team. I think at home that they're going to find a way to cover.
18.5 is a lot. Texas coming off the way that they played last week, I feel like it's going to be I know it's a big number. I know Vanderbilt with all that they have feels like they're all, they're moving up. Like the trajectory of the program is on the way up. But Texas off a loss, I like Texas. And I know it's a big number, but I like Texas. Number 21, Missouri, on the road at Alabama. Alabama is a 16.5-point favorite at home.
That's a big number for a team that's struggling in a way that Alabama hasn't in a long time. I think Missouri's going to cover. I think Alabama will win, but man, that's 2.5 scores. I just don't know if I'd give Alabama that against a good Missouri team.
a solid Missouri team.
I mean,
Like,
they're in the top
it's not the
25.
Missouri. It's not the Missouri team that they were last year. So I'm
No,
saying.
not the
So
one
it's
that just destroyed Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, but they're a good Missouri team. I think they'll cover.
yeah. The thing about Alabama is, right, they lose to Vanderbilt, and you expect them to come back the next week and just blow the doors off of South Carolina. It did not happen. And then this past week they go to Tennessee and didn't play overly well. And so, yeah, I want to sit here and say that, yeah, Missouri's got a chance in this one. It's 16.5. I'm going to take Alabama. I think I think they do break out. I think Jalen Milroe does find some life there. Washington traveling to Indiana, 13th ranked and unbeaten Indiana, who's a 6.5-point favorite in this game. College game day in Bloomington for this one.
Now, Indiana's quarterback, isn't he hurt?
O'Rourke, yes, he is. He is hurt. He is not going to play in the game. Apparently, their backup is just fine, but that would seem to matter.
Yeah. That's the biggest wrench in this one. I'm a believer in Indiana now. I cannot believe what they did to Nebraska, the way that they did it. Like, I'm not surprised that they won, but it's the story of the college football season as far as I'm concerned. Indiana has not been a relevant program for a long time. No one ever talks about them. And then all of a sudden, Kurt Cignetti comes in and does this. I think they're going to find a way, and they're going to cover, and they're going to still be unbeaten.
This is a very good, I should say, a good Washington defense. I know they just gave up 40 to Iowa, but they're still in the top 10 of the country in total defense. It might help that they've played Rutgers, Michigan, and Northwestern in this stretch, and maybe Iowa gave them a little bit. But yeah, I mean, at home, I think that place is going to be rocking. I'm going to go Indiana at home, even with their backup quarterback. Illinois traveling on the road to take on number 1 Oregon. The Illini coming off a big win against Michigan. They'd have just one loss. Oregon obviously off a blowout win over Purdue. Oregon at home is a 21.5-point favorite.
A week ago, Oregon was a 27.5-point favorite at Purdue, and I thought, Purdue's going to find a way to cover, and they got annihilated in the way that I probably should have expected. Illinois is clearly a much better team. You mentioned that one loss. It was 21-7 to unbeaten Penn State. I think that they're going to keep this game closer than what that spread indicates, though going into Outson is just – man, that's a hard place to play, and Oregon is great. But I think Illinois is going to cover. I think Oregon's going to win and stay unbeaten. And I mean, will they still be number 1 when they come here? We'll see.
I think so. Yeah. I think so. I think they win the game, but Illinois has played at 2 very difficult places to play already this year. I know Nebraska, the team itself is what it is, but the stadium, when it's rocking, is a tough place to play. And it was rocking that night when Illinois came to town. And Penn State is always a tough place to play, no matter the time of day. So they have played at some tough places. I think they keep the game closer than 21.5 because Brett Bielema wants to be able to run the ball. He wants to be able to play the way that he did. Someone, I think it was Adam Rittenberg, said that he compared this Illinois team to the 2010 to 2012 Badger teams, and I'm like, I think those teams would beat the heck out of this Illinois team, specifically the 2010 and 2011 versions of Wisconsin. I don't think Illinois is at that level, but maybe in terms of like the way that they play is kind of what he was meaning. But no, thank you. All right, final game: Wisconsin hosting Penn State. Nittany Lions unbeaten, 3rd ranked team in the country. They are a 6.5-point favorite at Wisconsin. What do you got?
I had a moment this week.
You know what? Just before we do, they under James Franklin, coming off a bye week, they won last year against UMass, but they have lost. They lost in 22 to Michigan. They lost in 21 to Illinois. They lost in 2019 to Minnesota, and they lost in 2018 to Michigan State. So they have not won a Big Ten game coming off a bye since 2017.
I had a moment this week where I wanted to pick Wisconsin outright, and I just kind of want to recenter myself and keep coming back to until they show they can actually win one of these. It's hard for me to pick them. all the stars, it looks like, are aligning. Like, you're right. Penn State has not been particularly good off buys, though that has no bearing on the current players, I suppose. It's just a fun stat, although maybe if you were here a few years ago with the portal, it's hard to keep track. I just think it's all set up for something really special. We talked about this earlier in the week, the win against Ohio State 14 years ago. They haven't beaten a top 3 team since, top 5 team. They don't get a ton of chances at home. They've had 3. The game being at night, Wisconsin playing really good football, maybe finding themselves. Having said that, I think Penn State wins by a field goal. So I think Wisconsin's going to cover. I expect this one to be close all the way through. I'm just not ready to say Wisconsin is going to get over the hump because I haven't seen it for so long.
Yeah, since you're going to be so negative,
No, you need to ride my coattails and fade my picks.
Yeah, no, but I'm not going to. I'm not. You're taking Wisconsin to cover, I should say. You're picking Wisconsin here against the spread. I'm going to go straight up Wisconsin. Yeah. I'm going to say Wisconsin 21, Penn State 20. So I'm going 21-20. Badgers find a way to get it done. Do you have a score? Yeah, I know you said by a field goal. Do you have a score?
24-21 Penn State's my pick.
Yeah, I feel like that's just like yeah. I feel like it's a tough game to pick. And I know that I am the king of show me before I give you anything, right? Like I'm going to be in show me mode the rest of the year. That's what I think I said after Alabama. And for the last 2 weeks, they've shown. And I think everything that's involved in this game just gives Wisconsin a chance to win it, and they find a way to win it. It's not like I feel great about picking that, but it has to at some point turn in Wisconsin's favor, right? You would think, maybe? No? I guess it doesn't, does it? But I'm going positive vibes here and saying that they find a way, and if they don't, well, then it is what it is, and they move on and go to Iowa next week, and we'll pick games next week too. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Wisconsin and Penn State coming up on Saturday night. We'll be back on Sunday to discuss all of it, whether we're talking about a big win or a disappointing miss at an opportunity. We'll look ahead to Iowa and continue this gauntlet that is extremely, extremely tough. They get, obviously, Penn State this week at Iowa next week. They get a bye, and then they get Oregon, Nebraska, and Minnesota. It's going to be a fun last 6 weeks here of the regular season. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is. Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.